All right, so I told myself I was laying off the buying the records for a little while. Now, those of us who buy and collect records know that that is a lie that we tell ourselves basically every day. But this time I'm a little bit proud of myself because I was like, look, Alex, you've been buying a lot of records. You've been spending a lot of money. You got some upcoming travel. You know, I can't be stopped from going to a record store, but I need to have better discipline about what I buy. So one of my local places was doing like a kind of like a tent sale where everything's $1, right? Now, most of the stuff going through there is trash, right? There's a reason it's $1. Either like someone, was basically gherkin all over the sleeve, or, the record looks like, someone ran it through a meat grinder, without any lube or anything. Like, it's just, there's a reason for it. But sometimes, depending, if you know what you're doing, you know what you're looking for, you can find some pretty cool stuff. Between some of the dollar records I got, and then sort of like a, cheap heat section, we'll call it, was a bunch of records that were, about $3. Now, some of those very in condition, none of these are like near mint, sort of thing. But for me and what I listen to and all that type of stuff, they're good for me. And I think there's some great records in here. So total, I spent $20. That's right, $20 on 13 records. Now, I have almost 3,000 records. I have most of what I want. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have grabbed right away. But, I don't want duplicates, all those different things. So I accidentally bought one duplicate, such is life. But other than that, I didn't have any of these, and I'm interested in them and all that type of stuff. So let me rephrase that. I bought two duplicates, but one of them, at the end I'll show you, was kind of a banger. So I should have said that off the jump, right? One of these that I bought for $3 is kind of a heavy hitter. Maybe go far as calling it a semi-grail, whatever, we'll get to that. So let's jump in with some of the some of the $1 records. We'll get some of the jazz stuff out of the way first, but this from 1963 or 4 is Wynton Kelly coming in the back door, if I had a nickel. So on Verve, Wynton Kelly with support from Kenny Burrell, Paul Chambers, and Jimmy Cobb. So if you're a jazz fanatic, 75% of this record was on Miles Davis's Kind of Blue from '59, which is kind of dope. So I saw this, I was like, well, this is a great lineup. Wynton Kelly's amazing, obviously. Paul Chambers, Kenny Burrell, and Jimmy Cobb are amazing. And it's a cool record. It's a little bit more, I don't want to say big band, but there's definitely more orchestration involved here. Arranged and conducted by Klaus Ogerman. So yeah, it's not your typical like hard bop or anything like that, but still a cool record to have. And it's Wynton Kelly with a great lineup, so we feel good about it. It's tough to find anything bad from this guy. Sad story. I think he ended up dying this year that this came out, but it's the Best of Wes Montgomery Volume 2. I think I already have Volume 1 also on the Verve label. And yeah, I mean, one of the most influential jazz guitarists out there. I learned recently that he spent a little bit of his early life actually in Columbus. I think he's from Indianapolis originally, but spent some time here in Columbus, which is pretty dope. So all the more reason to have more Wes Montgomery. He's one of those artists that's like, whether it's A&M stuff or Verve stuff, it's usually really cheap, and it's just so good, man. So yeah, if you're hip to know, then you're hip to know, whatever that means. Hey, speaking of Columbus and outside of the jazz sphere a little bit, I picked up the second record, Neon, from The Circle. So Sam over at Americana, Sam just showed this record, actually. He picked this one up for $1. This is a record from 1967 in mono from the band called The Circle. The Circle was a kind of 60s, kind of bubblegummy, a little bit psychedelic pop that was sort of known because Brian Epstein was also their manager. In fact, it was their manager. He was their manager who said he should be called The Circle, and then it was actually John Lennon who allegedly told them to spell it this way. So that's Cyrkle. They had a big hit in 1966 with Red Rubber Ball that was written by Paul Simon. And so this is the second record. Now, I have a story about seeing The Circle because two of these cats are actually from Columbus. And they now call Columbus home. They had this big reforming get together for the guys who are still alive. And they actually opened up for the Pete Best Band. Now, I got a great story about seeing Pete Best and his band, which I'll save for another time. Those who know. So yeah, did not have this one. I have Red Rubber Ball, that first record, but it's cool to have this. I'm kind of a sucker for this 60s bubblegummy psychedelic pop stuff. I think it's great. And obviously with the Ohio connection and the Beatle connection, it's totally worth having. Here's an American band. Again, these were all $1. Here's an American band that I've gotten into semi-recently. They only released 3 records. I had the second one, and now this is the third one, and probably their least quality one, but that's totally fine. This is Walking Wild from New England. 3 records. I think they came out 79, 80, 81. A very kind of just AOR, good pop rock band, has a little bit of progressive elements. At this point, there's kind of a lot more heavy on some of the synths and tacky keyboard parts, but their ballads are so good. I mean, they're so cheesy, overdone. It is full of that late 70s, early 80s kind of AOR sap, but guess what? I love that stuff. This one stood out to me because, of course, it had the loan for promotion, and I had to check that label, and it was a white label promo. So that's what really stood out to me, and why I'm glad I picked that up, which is awesome. Now, these next 2 are a couple of jazzy funk records, we'll call them. So one of my goals, I guess this year, is to get a lot more CTI records, or records that were on the CTI label. If you don't know, CTI stood for Creed Taylor Incorporated International, whatever. Creed Taylor was also the founder of Impulse Records, and he founded CTI in the mid to late 60s as sort of like an independent jazzy funk, fusion, soul label. But a lot of the stuff on CTI is it is funky, soulful stuff in your face. And so to get 2 of them for $1, I was pretty pumped on that. This is the first one here from 75, I think, 75 or 76. Hubert Laws, who is a flautist. This is called the Chicago Theme. This is dope. This is super funky, jazzy stuff. This is awesome. I mean, it's almost like proto-disco. It doesn't sound like disco, but you see where they're going here when we're talking the mid-70s. So when I say CTI, if you're, look for that label. If you see something with this on there, it's probably going to be pretty dope. I'm just saying, it's amazing. So yeah, Hubert Laws, the Chicago Theme, that was a super funky record, and again, $1. And I hear is the highest selling jazz artist of all time. He's one of the biggest selling artists ever, but I think he kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap because he just became a huge pop star sensation, and was singing a lot more, but his stuff on CTI is worth having. But it's George Benson in concert, Carnegie Hall, with Hubert Laws, or the guest of Hubert Laws, who I just showed playing flute. Almost said playing flute. Playing flute. So again, that's when you see that, pop the boner. That's when it's going to be good stuff, man. People who know George Benson know if you look for his CTI stuff, man, it is funky. He is ripping. It is amazing, amazing stuff. So if you're not in the know, get in the know. But yeah, those 2 from CTI. And then last, I believe this is the last jazz one I got for you here. I'm a big fan of this. Call this kind of California cool jazz, whatever you want to call it, but I think he's brilliant, and that is Ahmad Jamal. This is At the Pershing, but Not For Me, as it's called. 1958. This was on the Argo label. And yeah, I mean, this is just great kind of piano trio type stuff. He's ripping. I don't want to say it's not for everybody. It kind of is for everybody. I think he's just a little bit middle of the road for a lot of pretentious jazz people. I mean that wholeheartedly. Sorry, pretentious jazz people. But to me, he's dope. So he's getting referenced here. And for $1, can't pass it up. Now, here is one of the most misunderstood and mislabeled bands of all time. And I didn't have this record. And I'm so glad I do now, and I picked it up. It is the debut from 1971 from Midwest rockers, REO Speedwagon. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. Alex, why are you showing us an REO Speedwagon record? A, because they're fucking dope. Okay. B, C, A. Now, what a lot of people don't know, before they sort of became that late 70s, early 80s sappy AOR type stuff with Kevin Cronin crooning, that's what they should say, Kevin crooning, about, taking on the run and I can't fight this feeling out, there's this different stuff. They were a bluesy, hard rock, progressive band through the first several records. And this is their debut that doesn't even have Kevin Cronin on it. In fact, it has Terry Luttrell on it, or Terry Luttrell, who went on to actually be the vocalist in Starcastle, another another Illinois-based band that was kind of like a Yes clone in the 70s. But this is awesome. Gary Richrath is the man, the absolute man. This is nothing like the 80s stuff. Nothing at all like the 80s stuff. If you like in-your-face, bluesy, hard rock, check out this record. This one specifically is a 73 reissue on the orange Epic label. The originals from 71 are on the yellow Epic label. So I was stoked to have this. I didn't have this record, and I have all the other early REO stuff, and it just burns. So it's great stuff. That's the banger that I'm going to save for last. Let's get into some, God, these are all like 80s, kind of like pseudo metal records now, right? We'll go from jazz to whatever. Now we're in the $3 spot. These were all $3 now. And the first one I'm showing is the third studio record from Dokken, Under Lock and Key. So I'm not the biggest Dokken fan. I have great respect for them. I mean, I just struggle because I'm like, y'all are doing the hair thing. Do you really need to do the hair thing? Well, no one really needed to do the hair thing. I got great respect for George Lynch as a guitar player. I have Tooth and Nail. And so now I have Under Lock and Key, which is, again, the third from 1985. This had the big hit In My Dreams, which was huge in the 80s. But, yeah, for $3, I'm taking it. I mean, that's like I will say, this is like somewhere between like an $18 to $22 record in this condition. So I'm good to have it for $3. Let's keep it moving here. This was a cool live record that has been sort of on my radar for a while. I just never picked it up, but for $3, that works for me. It's a double, and it's MSG, the Michael Schenker Group, One Night at Budokan from 1982, after their second record, I believe. I've told the story a number of times. I won't share the whole thing now here, but Michael Schenker, other than being just one of the best guitarists ever and just an incredible talent, whether it was his first record with Scorpions or, you know, all the UFO stuff or what he was doing with MSG, that stuff's all amazing. I've always had a special place in my heart for him because when I was 19 years old, me and my stupid band opened for him up in Cleveland. So it was just cool to open for Michael Schenker Group, who had Gary Barden singing with him at the time, which is kind of cool. Cool lineup, though. You got Gary Barden singing. You obviously have Michael playing guitar. You got Cozy Powell, the great Cozy Powell on drums. Chris Glenn, who not at the time, I mean, he was sort of coming from or a member of Sensational Alex Harvey band. And then Paul Raymond, who was just doing everything at the time and who had done so much different stuff, kind of providing the keys, backing vocals, and some rhythm guitar. So hell of a lineup, great live show. Man, just one of the best soloists, one of the best riff writers. Amazing stuff. So let's actually, all these are sort of connected here a little bit. Michael Schenker was doing Michael Schenker stuff during 1981, 1982. Prior to that, he was doing UFO stuff, but he left UFO, right after the release of the UFO live record. UFO continued on with this record from 1980, I think, or 81, No Place to Run. Now, this is one of the duplicates. I didn't know I had this record, or I forgot. I just grabbed it. I said, for $3, let me grab it. But this is UFO's first record with Paul Chapman, who's an incredible player. He was coming from, I think, a band called Lone Star, but he did 4 records with UFO. This would end up being their first or whatever. You know, did he ever really truly fill the shoes of Michael Schenker? Probably not, but at the same time, he is one hell of a guitar player. So yeah, this is one of the duplicates that I didn't know I already had, but I'm sure I can find a good home for it somewhere along the way. Kind of another, I guess, connection to Michael Schenker, sort of. Here's a comp that I rarely see, and I don't buy a whole lot of comps, but I just think this is really cool. But it is Best of Scorpions, reissued from 1984 from a 1979 censored cover. Specifically, this is Best of Scorpions, which is a comp that focuses on the Uli John Roth era. So another one of these bands that I think blew up for a lot of people in the late 70s, early 80s with these huge kind of like hair, you know, radio hits or whatever. But you know, Scorpions had cranked out like 7 records before all that. So you're talking about all these great records, Fly to the Rainbow, In Trance, Virgin Killer, all this different stuff that Uli John Roth was playing guitar on. That is my favorite Scorpions. I love the debut with Michael Schenker all the way to, In Trance or Virgin Killer, whatever that last one is before Love Drive. Love those records. So this is a cool comp that sort of represents or that encompasses the Uli John Roth era, which is my favorite. So again, for a comp, very, very cool. $3 on this. Again, this was in typical Scorpions fashion, originally released with kind of a wacky sexual cover. in '79. This is the '84 reissue with a different label. And last and certainly not least, I saved the absolute banger for last. I was so pumped to find this. I do have a copy of this, but it is a early '70s reissue of it. You know, call it a grail, semi-grail. It's not worth a ton of money, but it's probably like a $40 or $50 record in the condition it's in. So to get it for $3, I'm just so pleased with it. But it is the debut from Alice Cooper, Pretty's for You. What makes this so important? Well, for those who don't know, Alice Cooper's first record, this one, sounds nothing like Billion Dollar Babies or any of that type of stuff that would come in the early '70s. This is a messy, weird, odd, psychedelic record. They were founded, discovered, what have you, by Frank Zappa, and he signed them to his Straight label, which at the time was a subsidiary of Warner Brothers and Reprise. Most of the time when you see this record out in the wild, it is a Warner Brothers reissue from the early '70s, right? Alice Cooper and the Alice Cooper Band have big success with I'm 18, Billion Dollar Babies, so Warner Brothers goes back and reissues this debut on the Warner Brothers label. It's difficult to find this record on the original Straight label. Not only that, when you do find this on the original Straight label, it's usually on that pink, kind of reddish sort of Straight label, similar to what Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask replica is on. What you don't see very often, and I had to like double take on that, is the kind of gold with blue writing Straight. So yeah, I was absolutely pumped on this. Pretty darn good condition too. I'd give this somewhere between a VG and a VG plus. Same with the sleeve. So yeah, I was just ecstatic to find this for $3 because it is worth a lot more than that. So although it's a duplicate, the collector in me was just stoked to find it. So there you go. Those are the 13 records I got for $20. You can still find good stuff out there. Keep on digging, people. And yeah, let's get after it. Cheers, everybody. Bye.